All right, this is just going to be some brief discussion about where we've been, where we're at, and where we're headed. So, the bulk of the semester, we've focused primarily on the concept of ideology. Now, why have we gone to such great lengths to focus on that? It is because it is primarily what is at stake. Right? I'm going to repeat that. Ideology is primarily what is at stake. And once we lose that, we've lost everything. So, as you know, ideology sort of operates as an operating system that instead of being on your hard drive, it would be an operating system that you download onto the brain, and then you in turn use that to understand and interpret the world. When you don't have one, if you're in between, which is very rare, people generally don't ditch them entirely. They just morph a little bit, but on occasion it does happen. You may experience what is sometimes referred to as a cosmology event. I don't think we've discussed that. It's not important, but it essentially throws you into a state of liminal space or liminality, which is a no man's land. You have no ideology. And why is this dangerous? First of all, understand this. You are not going to be able to understand why it's so dangerous. You'll just have to take my word for it. And the reason you won't be able to understand it is because the operating system on the computer can't know what it's like to not have an operating system. There is no such discernible state, right? And so the same goes with an ideology. When you go into a state of liminal space or liminality, it makes you so extraordinarily susceptible to anyone who comes along with any idea. And again, it's impossible for you to see that because you have an operating system right now, and you're listening and interpreting, and you're thinking to yourself, "Well, that never happened to me. Maybe a crazy person would slip into that and then be manipulated." No, no, that's wrong. Any person who loses an ideology becomes that lump of clay that anyone can come along and just throw you on the wheel and start shaping you in anything that they want. It's wrong to look at people who are in these suicide cults and these other dangerous cults and to say, how could they all do that? How could they act that way? They must be crazy. No, they're not crazy. They're no different than we are. They're just in between ideologies. Something has collapsed, whatever it was to send them there, and you see the unfortunate results. So why has this been the primary focus? Because it is the responsibility of a mass media to maintain a healthy and robust ideology. Now, that doesn't mean to passively accept every silly myth and story for fear of disrupting the American ideology. Quite to the contrary, mass media has an obligation to question, to try to remain neutral and objective insofar as that's possible, and to essentially serve as a check and balance for government, right? The fourth branch of government, if you will, the sort of people's check. Right? They're there to make sure that everyone's doing their jobs, and nobody's stealing the money, and that they're held to account. So, what happens when an ideology is subverted? Well, the first thing that they do is go directly to the mass media and also to the education systems. Those are the two main areas that they want to infiltrate in order to start to subvert an ideology. And how do they subvert an ideology? Yuri Bezmenov can explain it much better than I can, much more succinctly, and so I will attach the video to this one, and you can watch that on your own. But basically, they are using what they call active measures or активные мероприятия, and that means that they are actively pushing the ideology of the enemy within the borders of our country or whatever country the KGB might target. And so the idea is to disrupt thinking of an entire generation of people, and you do that in the education system because it takes 15 years approximately or more to educate a generation. Once you've exposed them to the ideology of the enemy, and they are free to go around espousing that and free to spread these ideas and free of consequence themselves, which is important to note, that will slowly begin to corrode a society People no longer believe in the institutions. Everything's racist. Everything's biased. Too many asymmetries in society. Criminals are victims. Police are the criminals. Um, Racism is taught openly in schools, and it is sold as the good racism is okay as long as it achieves equity. Um, Racism itself is neutral. It's just what it ends up as. I mean, these are sick and perverted ideas that would have been obvious a generation ago. And the fact that the ideology of the country here has become poisoned and riddled with these problems um, is really a direct result of education and mass media. So, for our purposes, the role of the mass media is to question and to safeguard and hold people to account. And so, when you've used the education system to impress upon the next generation of reporters and journalists this ideology of the enemy that they're exposed to on a routine basis, although it's kind of dressed up a little bit in the universities, that's a separate discussion. But um, once you've done that, then they go out into the media and they don't see what they're doing as biased or political. They don't have the ability to see that. They've been programmed to respond to stimuli, period. And so they feel that their causes are moral causes and that they are justified in supporting the causes they do because these are moral positions. It's not that they're leftists, it's not that they're conservatives, it's whatever it is. It's that the position is moralized. You cannot argue with a moralized position. If I come to the table and I believe that I have the moral high ground, there is essentially nothing that you can say to win the argument because at the end of the day, I have the moral high ground. You lose. So, all of these are important things to think about. Just from a standpoint of definition, think about cognitive dissonance or mental confusion. This is what begins to occur during the active measures and the breakdown of ideology when the mass media is not doing its job. You have the liminal space, and then you have the active measures. So active measures are occurring, and you have some people who are going into liminal space, and there's a general cognitive dissonance out in society. And so this is what happens when you have a mass media that is entirely AWOL or they're in bed with one party or the other. And so you've seen that very clearly today. I think almost any channel that you turn to is going to be biased. We can no longer rely on network news. ABC, NBC, CBS, off the deep end a long time ago. They're fully committed to their moralized political positions. So we've got a lot of work to do, but this is a little bit of discussion about the theme of the semester so far without a tremendous amount of detail in this video. So I will include either in a separate video or on a Word document, if I can remember to convert it over from pages this time, some terminology and some more specific things. But for this first exam, we're going to take a look at the very broad view of things and some of the discussions that we've had and some of the points that we've made and some of the criticisms that we've developed. So try to think about that and give me another day and I'll add some specific terminology. All right. See you soon.